as the chef, as the owner, was that I would put my hands into something that I knew for a fact would be served for anybody going through both restaurants at any time during the day. As I opened my first restaurant in 2010, I had the sense that bread was the most important part of the entire meal. Back then, the whole sourdough scene that you know from Copenhagen was non-existent. I worked in what became the world's greatest restaurant, and the bread at the time was horrible. Now, it's not that I experienced it as horrible because I was not more informed than anybody else at the time, but we used to have these small spelt buns and small buns made out of Manitoba flour that was whipped, sort of kneaded so hard, the bare mixer, that the mixer would fucking move because it was just being whipped for 30 minutes or so. Such glutinous flour, and the buns were chewy. Now after service, just spreading on some of that pork fat, with a little crispy pork fat on it, and eating these by the truckload, sure. But it had nothing to do with the sourdough that you know from Copenhagen today. So, just before I quit Noma, a German chef, pastry chef, he came and he introduced a new type of bread for the restaurant. I think that bread was already way better. So it didn't take long for the bread from being mediocre to being great, like way better. So I had just quit at the time, and I remember asking the guy, hey man, can I have some of that sourdough? Because I want to make bread at home. And I had a long period of time between when I quit, which was like April 2009, the whole year at least, I was just making bread at home. And I can tell you, it was garbage. I misunderstood sourdough as something that was just the equivalent of yeast. So we have this idea that you add yeast and something proves. You add more yeast, it proves more. You add too much yeast, too much heat, it goes too fast, it gets all over the place. But that's not exactly how it works with sourdough. So I would just add sourdough, and I would add more sourdough, and because it came out flat and extremely sour, like a peasant bread, I just added more sourdough. Didn't make much sense. But I got better and I understood the process better. So we had a chef come, Karen Mann. She came and she had baking experience, and she was kind of like, this is this bread, man. We need to, okay. And she started incorporating the folds of folding the bread, and it just improved dramatically in a very short time. She had our sourdough younger and less pronounced, less sour, and it just started to become something different and way better. So in the meantime, we opened Manfreds as well, so it was now not just one restaurant but two restaurants. And this was the good old days where I could have my hands on stuff. And what I would do is I would make the bread very often. And I believe in the beginning we did it at Manfreds and we did it at Manfreds for both Relæ and Manfreds. And then in the end we made it at Relæ. As the chef, as the owner, was that I would put my hands into something that I knew for a fact would be served for anybody going through both restaurants at any time during the day. There was something greater than just doing one process. It was like a process that was essential to the meals of whoever would come through. So Relæ was, it was a menu, it was a longer menu. Manfreds was as a shorter menu, but back then in the beginning it was also just mostly takeaways and some dishes of the day. So there's something to this way of finding some place and some spot where you can just influence everything that goes on in a restaurant. And I think bread, at least in this type of restaurant, was more than anything by coincidence, my way to really feel a connection with every single guest in the restaurant.